Slapberries are actually more useful than you'd think. OCE's Jivano and Spoctic land to the north of Anvil Square. Apparently it's called Fridgeburg. I'm not going to call it that. What? My girlfriend's roasted me now because I can't do this line properly. Fridgeburg. Now, one of the things that they do in their early game is they always ensure that they use slapberries to heal up their HP as much as possible. Now, this gives them just like a little bit of extra heals left in their inventory, but because they're in the center of the map already, they can throw these extra heals into the position that they're going to build up on, which allows them to trade damage later on. So if they're looking for damage with other players and they take some in return, they have a bunch of extra heals already in their drop spot. This is super reliable based on the fact that they're already in the mid map. I don't actually know that much about both of these players, but after looking at their Twitter page for roughly 6 seconds each, I did find out that Jivado is actually 26. So he's an old boomer, represent old gang, me and you wrinkling up real time soon. But what I find interesting about that is he is living proof. You can win tournaments if you're over the age of 20. Requirement seems to be though, play on OC. One of the most common issues this season is no loot. Middle East players FGS and Adapter have a great workaround for this. Their plan is to take this entire area, which covers the gas station and the spire here. However, another team ends up landing here and taking it off spawn. Now, the low amount of loot at their drop spot just isn't enough to win a game from, so they need to get more. Off spawn, they find their loot as quickly as possible, and then rather than just mindlessly running and trying to get there as quick as possible to the other team, they create a pinch where one player will go down to the south and the other player will go round to the north, meaning that they can collapse in on the inside and pinch the opponent. Now, just a common pinch like this is very, very simple. However, this is something very intentional that they do game after game, and it's something that you should plan for the drop spots around you to ensure that you can pick up those eliminations as easy as possible, steal their loot, and win the game. FKS and Adapter won, I think, this qualifier. They also won, spoiler alert for next week's video, qualifier number 2 as well, which is incredibly impressive. And if you look back through their history this season, they're like clearly the top Middle East team to win Major 1 overall. And one of the cool things I saw Asia player Runo and Coyote do is actually just use the bush. What's this item called? The bush something? Bush item. Big bush bomb. Okay. Was throw the big bush bomb down onto the capture the flag. This allows him to get the gold in particular, which allows him to re-roll his augments more often, but in particular just keeps him safe while doing this without wasting any materials. This trick that they use in endgame is absolutely broken. Now, most people will do this hammer trick where they'll fire themselves up into players' boxes who are up above them to knock them out, but the problem is this leaves you exposed. What Koyo does in this clip is he edits a cone so that when he uses the shockwave hammer, he doesn't fire himself upwards, but instead forwards into his own builds. However, this still destroys 3 layers up above him, which drops an opponent down straight into his box and allows him to pick up a super easy refresh with minimal risk. Or so I thought. When I went back to check this afterwards, I realized that the ramp is not the thing that makes you fly forward rather than upwards. What actually does that is just running forward. However, this will usually break a bunch of the builds in the box that you're landing on. So to avoid this, make sure you're standing directly in the center of this tile. You can see that I've edited this floor in order to ensure I'm standing right in the middle, and walk forward just before your hammer hits the floor. You'll fly into that box with destroying none of the builds in the one you're landing in, but all of the ones above you. This trick plays perfectly into their playstyle because from the one game I watched, I know it was very in-depth. They played a really nice low ground playstyle, and it makes a lot of sense in a meta with lots of shockwave hammers because ultimately no one's going to be below you to knock you out, and you have all of the control of the other players in the lobby to knock them out. The most important analytical note is that these guys use the Scottish flag on the leaderboard, therefore they should win FNCS, obviously. This ridge is overpowered somehow. The entire of the southeast of the map is covered by an elevated area which has a ridge completely surrounding it. In a game like this where the zone is on the southeast, all of these players around the outside of the edge of this zone will have to rotate up on top of this hill. This means that the players like Kurtz and Magni that get up onto this hill early are at a massive advantage because they can continually tag players trying to rotate in late after them. However, this is going to cause a massive problem for them later on because all of these players that are on the outside of the zone are eventually going to rotate in towards them, and they're all going to be clustered, which means it's very likely that they're going to get fought. Thankfully, they made the right play and chose to rotate out before the zone closed to keep away from these players. Now, I want to stress, this play not the best. Any West Pros, Caesar and Angels are down below Storm Surge and getting tagged, which means that eventually they're going to have to make a play to deal more damage to other players because they're going to run out of heals and die. So they make a very aggressive play to double hammer onto a box that's nearby. Now what I find interesting about this is while they're in the air, they spray out one of the cones, and as they land, he places his own cone and then uses the momentum from that hammer to slide through into the box, where then he can quickly get the wall replaced. And because this is done relatively quickly, this allows them just to pick up 2 super free refreshes, gets them above Storm Surge, and saves them. Now this isn't a great play by any means, but I think it's a really good example of a bad play done with confidence and also a lot of aggression and speed is often much better done than a good plan done slowly. One of the things that I saw NA East winners Canada and Agers do was using the fishing rod and delaying their reality augments to get a lot of the jellyfish fished. Now if you've watched some of my older videos and my shorts, you'll notice I've talked about this already, so I'm not going to go in depth. But it's cool to see my theory crafting come to reality in game. 99% of players would make a mistake on this rotate. Now notice Canada and Agers both have a max distance 4th zone rotate here, and they both have hammers in their inventory. Now the sound that the hammer makes when you're using this to rotate is extremely loud, and you can hear this from a far distance away. Now notice they start this rotation off on foot instead, because this area of the map has a lot of trees, has a lot of coverage, so there's no real reason for them to use their hammers, as it's just going to alert everyone around them. Once they get about halfway through this rotate, there's a team in front of them who hammers instead, but again, they're smart. They wait and listen and hear that not one single person has started to shoot this team that rotated in front of them, which shows that there's no one looking at this direction, so then they're just free to use their own hammers to rotate in early. Had they used their hammers earlier in the rotate, this would have alerted the entire lobby to look this direction, meaning that this rotate wouldn't have been as free. It's extremely frustrating when you're trying to tarp and you just keep getting knocked down by players below you using their hammers. But there's actually a pretty simple fix to this. EU pro players Diox and Mappy always try to find the dead side of the moving zones, which is the side with the least amount of players on it. You can notice in this clip how they rotate all the way out to the edge of the zone to ensure that there's no players below them. If there's no one below you, they can't hammer through your boxes. Because there's also nobody below them, this allows them to drop all the way down to the ultimate low ground and claim that layer. And as we saw with our Asia duo, this is an incredibly powerful position to be in this current meta. This was a tip from every single region's winner of the FNCS Week 1, but if you're looking for more specific tips for Chapter 4, click this video on screen right now.